Dad, we can't go home. I heard Mom planning something bad for us. That's what my 8-year-old son whispered to me in the airport parking garage, 10 minutes after I'd hugged my wife goodbye and watched her wheel her suitcase through the sliding doors toward her business trip. I laughed it off. I actually laughed. Told him he probably misheard her talking about redecorating the guest room. I didn't know it yet, but that whisper was the only reason the two of us are alive to tell this story. Welcome back. Pour your coffee, settle in, and get ready. Because in these stories, karma always finds the address. Subscribe so you never miss what happens next. My name is Derek. I'm 41 years old. I sell commercial vac systems for a living. And up until that night I would have told you my marriage was fine. Not great. Fine. The kind of fine that's really just two people who've stopped fighting, because they've stopped caring enough to fight. My son's name is Eli. He's small for his age. Quiet. The kind of kid who notices things adults miss because adults are too busy talking to actually listen. And in the back seat of my car that evening, buckled in, gripping his backpack like a life raft, he wasn't making it up. A few minutes earlier, walking her in through the parking garage to the terminal doors, none of it had felt like the beginning of anything. Eloise had hugged Eli first, the way she always did, crouching down to his height, telling him to be good for Dad and to eat something green at least once while she was gone. Then she'd hugged me, quick, efficient, a peck on the cheek that landed more on the corner of my mouth than anywhere else. 4 days, she'd said, checking her phone instead of my face. Conference sessions run late, so don't wait up on calls. I'll text when I land. We'll survive, I told her. Won't we, bud? Eli hadn't answered. I remember that now, turning it over, how he'd gone quiet the second she'd pulled her suitcase off the curb, how he hadn't run up for one more hug the way he usually did, how his eyes had tracked her all the way through the sliding doors like he was memorizing something. I hadn't thought anything of it. 8-year-olds get moody. I chalked it up to him not wanting Mom to leave, same as always, and we turned back toward the car, me already thinking about dinner, about the game I wanted to watch, about absolutely nothing that mattered. We were barely out of the parking garage when he finally spoke. What do you mean something bad? I asked him, pulling onto the access road. She was on the phone. In the bathroom. She thought I was asleep. His voice was so small I had to turn the radio off to hear him. She said, they'll both be home by 8. And then she said something about the house. And she sounded happy about it, Dad. Not happy. Weird happy. I want to tell you I trusted my kid immediately. I didn't. I told him it was probably nothing, that Mommy had a lot on her plate with work, that sometimes grown-ups say strange things on the phone that don't mean what they sound like. I was already composing the joke I'd make to Eloise when she landed. Our son thinks you're plotting against us, babe. 8-year-olds, right? But Eli didn't let it go. He never lets things go. That's either the most annoying or the most valuable trait he inherited from me, depending on the day. Can we not go home yet? He asked. Please, Dad, can we wait somewhere? So I did something I still can't fully explain, except to say that some part of me, some animal, hindbrain part that doesn't care about looking foolish, believed him. I drove 2 blocks past our street and parked in the gravel lot, behind the old barn that backs up to our property line, abandoned for years. Nobody's ever minded us cutting through. From there, through a gap in the tree line, you can see the back porch light of our house. We sat in the dark. Eli held my hand so tight, his knuckles went white. This is silly, I told him, mostly to convince myself. We're going to sit here for 10 minutes, feel dumb, and then go home and I'll make you a grilled cheese. He didn't answer, he just kept staring at the house. Dad? Yeah, bud, you believe me, right? You're not just doing this so I'll stop talking about it. I almost lied to him. It would have been easy, a quick of course I believe you. The kind of thing you say to a kid to smooth things over so you can both go back to normal. But something about the way he asked it, so carefully, like he'd been bracing to be brushed off, stopped me. Honestly? I said. I don't know what I believe yet. But I believe you. I believe you heard something that scared you enough to whisper it to me in a parking garage, instead of waiting till we got home. That's enough for me to sit in a dark car for 10 minutes. Okay? He nodded, small, and scooted a little closer to the door, eyes never leaving the porch light. What do you think it is? He asked. What she was planning. I don't know, bud. Probably nothing. Probably you heard part of a conversation about work, or about a surprise, and your brain filled in the scary parts, because it was late, and you were half asleep. I wasn't asleep, I know. I'm just saying it's probably nothing. You keep saying probably. He wasn't wrong. I noticed it too, the way the word kept sneaking back into my own sentences, no matter how many times I tried to sound certain. Kids catch that. They always catch that. 5 more minutes, I told him. Then grilled cheese, I promise. He didn't answer. He just kept staring at the house. And something about his stillness, the way an 8-year-old shouldn't be able to sit that quiet, that focused, for that long, made the hair on the back of my neck stand up before I even understood why. 10 minutes later, I froze. 2 figures came around the side of the house, not walking up the front path like neighbors, not ringing the bell like solicitors. Moving low, along the fence line, the way you move when you don't want to be seen. One of them was carrying something, a red plastic container. My stomach knew what it was before my brain caught up. Dad, Eli's voice cracked. Dad, that's... I see it, buddy. Stay down. I should have called the police right then. I know that now. Instead, I sat there like an idiot for maybe 90 seconds, telling myself it was a trick of the porch light, that the shape in that man's hand was a watering can, a toolbox, anything but what it obviously was. Then I smelled it, even from that distance, even through a cracked car window, the sharp chemical stink of gasoline drifting across the yard. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. 911. What's your emergency? There are people breaking into my house. They've got gasoline. I think they're going to. The first window lit up orange before I even finished the sentence. Dad. Eli was crying now, silent. The kind of crying that scares you more than screaming does. Dad. That's my room. That's my room. I don't remember getting out of the car. I remember the dispatcher's voice telling me to stay put, stay safe. Units were 3 minutes out. I remember Eli's fingers digging into my arm as I half carried him further back into the tree line, putting the barn between us and the house, because if those men were the kind of people who set fire to a house with, as far as I knew, as far as they knew, a father and son sleeping inside, they were the kind of people who might notice a car idling in the dark and decide to finish the job with their own hands. The fire trucks came. The police came. My house. The house where I'd carried Eli over the threshold as a newborn, where we'd painted his room a color he'd since decided was for babies, where Eloise and I had eaten 1,000 forgettable dinners at a kitchen island I'd built myself, burned for 40 minutes before they got it under control. A detective named Quinn found me sitting on the tailgate of a fire crew's truck with a blanket around Eli's shoulders, both of us staring at the smoking ruin of everything we owned. Derek, she said, I need you to tell me exactly what you saw. Everything. Don't leave anything out, even if it sounds crazy. I told her. About the whisper in the parking garage. About the men. About the gasoline. About the fact that my wife was supposedly 40,000 feet in the air on a business trip to Denver right now and had no idea her house was on fire. Detective Quinn's face didn't change much. But she wrote something down, underlined it twice, and asked one question that made the bottom drop out of my stomach. Derek, was your house recently insured? Any changes to the policy? Increases in coverage? I didn't know. That was Eloise's department. She handled the boring stuff, she always said, while I handled the yard and the cars and whatever else fell under the unspoken category of husband things. I told Quinn I'd have to check. Check, she said. Soon, and Derek, I'd hold off on calling your wife just yet. Let us reach out first. I want to tell you I argued. I didn't. Some part of me, the same animal part that had trusted an 8-year-old's whisper over my own wife's 15 years of marriage, already knew what Quinn was circling. Here's the thing about a marriage going wrong right under your nose. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't hand you a memo. It just erodes. One skipped dinner and one distracted answer at a time. Until one day you look up and realize you've been living next to a stranger for the better part of a year and you called it busy season, because that was easier than calling it what it was. Looking back, and God did I spend the next several weeks looking back, there'd been 100 small things I'd filed under fine. Eloise staying late at the office 3 nights a week for a reorg that never seemed to resolve. Eloise taking her phone into the bathroom to shower, which I used to joke about. Actually joke. Like it was some quirky habit, instead of a woman hiding her screen from her own husband. Eloise and Caroline's weekend girls' trips, that had started up out of nowhere, around the same time the office reorg supposedly began. I'd met Caroline a dozen times over the years. Barbecues, Eli's birthday parties, the wedding. She'd always been friendly to me in that overly bright way some people manage when they don't actually like you, but know they have to perform liking you for the sake of someone else. I used to tell Eloise that Caroline gave me a weird feeling. Eloise used to laugh and say I was imagining things, that Caroline was just intense, that some women were like that with each other and men never understood it. I believed her. That's the part that still gets me. I believed her right up until a detective slid a bank camera photo across a table and showed me my wife's best friend sitting across from an insurance agent 40 minutes after my house should have been an alibi. We spent that night in a Days Inn off Route 9. Eli wasn't asleep yet when I thought he was. I found that out around midnight when I heard his voice, small and flat, cutting through the dark. "Dad? Hey, you're supposed to be sleeping. Was that my fault?" I sat up so fast I nearly knocked the lamp off the nightstand. "What? Bud, no, absolutely not. Why would you think that? Because if I hadn't said anything, we would have just gone home." And then, his voice caught. And then it would have just been a regular night. Nothing would have happened. "Eli, look at me." I crossed the room and sat on the edge of his bed, and he let me pull him into a hug that he usually would have been too old and too cool for. "If you hadn't said anything, we would have walked into that house, and neither of us would be having this conversation right now. You didn't cause this. You stopped this. Do you understand the difference?" "I guess. I need you to actually understand it, not just say I guess." He was quiet for a long moment, his face pressed into my shoulder. "Is Mom okay?" That one landed harder than I expected. I hadn't even let myself ask it yet, whether Eloise, wherever she actually was safe, was hurt, was in on it, was a victim of it herself. I still had a version of that night in my head where somehow she wasn't involved at all, where this was something done to her too. I don't know yet. I told him, honestly, the police are trying to find out. That's their job right now, not ours. Our job tonight is just to sleep, okay? You did everything right today. Everything. I need you to hear me say that. "Okay," he said, and burrowed further into the blanket, and within a few minutes his breathing evened out into real sleep, the kind 8-year-olds fall into all at once, like a switch flipped. I didn't sleep. I lay there doing the math I didn't want to do. Eloise had picked up more shifts at the office over the last 4 months. Started going in on weekends. Started taking calls in the bathroom, the garage, the car, anywhere I wasn't. I chalked it up to a promotion she was chasing. I'd been proud of her, actually. Told my coworkers my wife was a hard charger. I'd been an idiot. Around 3 a.m., I did something I'm not proud of. I logged into our joint email. I still had the password. We'd never bothered changing it in 15 years. And started searching. Insurance, policy, State Farm, homeowners. I found the email 11 minutes later, dated 6 weeks earlier. Subject line, policy update, confirmation. From an agent named Anthony. The coverage on our house had been increased. Substantially, structure and contents. Both. There was a line about a rider for additional named perils that I didn't fully understand. But the dollar figure at the bottom, I understood just fine. It was more than double what I remembered us carrying. I sat in that motel bathroom with my phone in my hand and my son asleep 20 feet away, and I felt something in my chest go very, very cold and very, very quiet. Not rage. Not yet. Something colder than rage. The kind of stillness you feel right before you decide you're never going to be the same person again. At 6 a.m., Detective Quinn called. "Derek, your wife's flight landed in Denver at 9:40 last night." "Okay, she never boarded it." I didn't say anything for a long moment. "Airport surveillance has her going through security," Quinn continued, "but she doesn't appear on the gate camera or the jet bridge footage. We pulled the manifest. She was a no-show. The airline flagged it themselves, actually. No-shows on domestic flights get logged automatically now, post 9/11 protocol. We just had to ask. So where is she? That's what I'm hoping you can help me find out." Here's the part of this story where I could tell you I fell apart. I didn't, and I think that surprised even me. 15 years of marriage, and the woman I'd built a life with, had apparently decided that life was worth more to her burned to the ground with an insurance check attached than it was worth continuing to live. And somewhere in that calculation she decided her own son was an acceptable loss. That's the part I couldn't get past. Not the affair I now assumed was underneath all of this. Because there's always an affair underneath all of this, isn't there? But the fact that Eli's name had never once, in whatever conversation she'd had on that phone, come up as a reason to stop. They'll both be home by 8. Both. She knew he'd be with me. She sent it anyway. I called my sister Jade first thing that morning. Jade is the kind of person who shows up before you finish asking her to. She was at the motel by 9 with a duffel bag of Eli's cousin's old clothes, a box of donuts he didn't touch, and a look on her face that told me she already knew this was bad before I said a word. "Where's Eloise?" she said. Not a question. "I don't know." "Derek." Jade's voice went low, the way it did when we were kids, and she was about to say something I needed to hear whether I wanted to or not. "Tell me everything." So I did. All of it. The whisper, the men, the fire, the missing flight, the insurance email. By the time I finished, Jade wasn't crying. She was doing something scarier. She was calm. "Okay," she said. "First, Eli doesn't go anywhere near her. Not a phone call, not a text, nothing until the police say otherwise. Second, you're going to want to fall apart, and I need you to not do that in front of him. Third," she grabbed my hand, "we are going to find out exactly what she did, and exactly who helped her do it, and then we're going to make sure she never gets to stand in a room with that little boy again, unless it's a courtroom." I didn't know yet how literally that would come true. We took Eli to see a child therapist that first week, a soft-spoken woman Quinn recommended, who specialized in trauma. I sat in the waiting room the whole session, and afterward, in the parking lot, Eli surprised me by wanting to tell me about it himself instead of letting the therapist do it. "She asked me if I feel guilty," he said, climbing into the car. "What'd you tell her?" "I told her sometimes. She said that's normal. She said the brain does this thing where it tries to make sense of scary stuff by finding somebody to blame, and sometimes it picks you even when it's not your fault, because blaming yourself feels more controllable than admitting bad things just happen." I glanced at him in the rearview mirror. That's a lot of big words for one session. She wrote it on a whiteboard. I copied it into my notebook so I wouldn't forget. "Can I see?" He passed it up between the seats. A kid's notebook, cartoon dinosaurs on the cover, and inside, in careful 8-year-old handwriting. Not my fault. I did the right thing. Grown-ups are supposed to protect me, not the other way around. I had to pull over for a second. Just a second. Told him I wanted to check my phone for directions. "Dad, are you crying?" "No, you're crying." "I'm not crying, I've got something in my eye." "You always say that." "Because it's always true," I said, and he let me have the lie, the way kids sometimes do when they've decided you need it more than they need the truth. Quinn asked to interview Eli formally that same week. Not at the station, she was careful to explain, but in a soft-lit room designed for exactly this, with a child forensic specialist, trained to ask questions that don't lead a kid toward an answer they think the adults want. I watched through a one-way glass, which felt like the longest 10 minutes of my life up to that point, though it wouldn't stay the longest for much longer. "Eli, can you tell me what you heard your mom say on the phone?" the specialist asked. Gentle, unhurried, she said, "They'll both be home by 8. She was talking quiet, like she didn't want anybody to hear. And then she laughed a little. Not a normal laugh. What made it not normal? Eli thought about that for a long moment, the way he does, turning a question over before answering it. Like when you laugh because something's funny. Your face gets happy first, and then the laugh comes out. Hers was backwards. The laugh came out, and her face didn't match it. Even through the glass I saw the specialist's pen pause on the page. "That's a really good way to describe it," she told him. "Can you tell me what happened after that? After you heard her say that?" "I told my dad I heard something. He didn't believe me at first. I don't think he wanted to believe me. But he still listened." "How did that feel? Him not believing you at first?" "Scary, because if he didn't believe me and we went home, I thought, Eli stopped, twisting his hands in his lap. I thought maybe I was wrong and it would be fine. But I also thought maybe I was right, and nobody would know until it was too late. You said something to him that made him stop the car. Do you remember what you said? I asked if we could wait somewhere. I didn't tell him everything at first because I was scared he'd think I was being dramatic. My teacher says I'm dramatic sometimes. Do you think you were being dramatic that night? Eli shook his head, slow and certain, in a way that made something in my chest crack straight down the middle. No, he said. That night I was just right. Afterward in the hallway, Quinn found me leaning against the wall, not quite steady. He's a remarkable kid, she said. He shouldn't have had to be, I said. He should have just gotten to be 8. Quinn didn't have anything to say to that. Neither did I, really. We just stood there a moment, letting it be true. Detective Quinn called me back into the station 2 days later. My brother-in-law, Dante, Jade's husband, a contractor who'd wired half the county's houses and consequently knew half the county's business, came with me, mostly because Jade didn't trust me to drive myself anywhere in the state I was in. Quinn had a folder. She slid 3 photographs across the table. Do you recognize either of these men? The first was a still from a gas station camera 2 miles from our house, time-stamped an hour before the fire. A man filling a red plastic container at the pump, the same red container I'd seen carried around the side of my house. He was heavyset, bald, wearing a Carhartt jacket I didn't recognize. No, I said. His name is Blake, small time. Couple priors for arson-adjacent stuff. Insurance jobs, mostly. Dumpster fires for cash. One warehouse thing that never quite got proven. He's not the mastermind type. He's hired muscle. And him? I pointed to the second photo, a leaner man, younger, caught on the same camera getting into the passenger seat, working on an ID. But here's the interesting one. She tapped the third photo. A woman, mid-30s, sitting across from a man at a restaurant booth, taken from what looked like a bank's exterior security camera positioned to catch the street. Do you recognize her? I did. Caroline, Eloise's co-worker. Her best friend, technically, though I'd always found something a little too sharp about the way Caroline looked at me. Like she was cataloging something. They'd worked together for 6 years. Caroline had been at our wedding. She'd held Eli when he was 4 days old. That's Caroline, I said. Why is she? That photo was taken 40 minutes after your wife's flight was scheduled to depart. This is a bank, 2 blocks from your house. And the man across from her, Quinn slid a 4th photo across, a DMV headshot this time, is Anthony, your insurance agent. The room went very quiet. Anthony processed the coverage increase on your policy 6 weeks ago, Quinn said. He also, we've since learned, has an unusually close personal relationship with your wife that predates that increase by about 8 months. We pulled hotel records. We pulled phone records. Derek, I don't think this was a spontaneous decision your wife made. I think this was planned, in detail, for months. And I think your wife's flight wasn't a decoy that fell apart. I think it worked exactly as intended. She has an airtight alibi, a boarding pass, a boarding attempt on record, and 2 witnesses who will swear she was in Denver by dinner time. If your son hadn't overheard that call, and if the 2 of you hadn't come home to a burning house instead of walking into one, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. They weren't trying to burn a house, I said, and my voice came out flatter than I expected. They were trying to burn us with it. Quinn held my eyes. I can't confirm intent yet. But the coverage on the contents of that house included a life insurance rider filed on both you and your son 11 weeks ago. I'd say the math speaks for itself. What about the fire itself? Dante cut in. He'd been quiet the whole meeting. Arms crossed, jaw working like he was chewing on something he wasn't ready to spit out. Arson's not exactly subtle. Doesn't the fire marshal's report tell you when and how it started? It will, Quinn said. Preliminary findings came back an hour ago, actually. Accelerant, multiple points of origin, kitchen, master bedroom, and, she hesitated, just long enough for me to feel it in my chest before she said it, your son's room. Nobody said anything for a moment. They wanted it fast, Quinn continued, quieter now. 3 points of origin means you don't get out. It means the whole structure goes up close to simultaneously. If you and Eli had been asleep in that house, Derek, the fire marshal's preliminary opinion is you'd have had somewhere between 90 seconds and 2 minutes before smoke inhalation took you both. You wouldn't have made it to the hallway. I don't remember standing up. I remember Dante's hand on my shoulder, pushing me back down into the chair before my legs gave out entirely. Why, I said. It came out smaller than I meant it to. Why like that? Why not just, I don't know. Why not just leave? Why not just take whatever this is and go? Quinn didn't have an answer for that, not one she was willing to say out loud in that room, and I understood later that the honest answer, because a live husband can contest a divorce settlement, and a live husband with sole knowledge of a fraudulent insurance policy is a liability, and a dead husband is just a payout, was the kind of answer that doesn't get said to a man's face, until a courtroom makes her say it under oath. I'm going to skip the part where I threw up in the station bathroom. I'm going to skip the part where Dante had to hold me by the collar of my shirt to keep me from putting my fist through the drywall. You don't need those details. What you need to know is what happened after, because that's the part that matters. Eloise texted me that night. First contact since the airport. Hey, landed safe. Hotel Wi-Fi is garbage lol. How's Eli? Miss you both already. Sitting in Jade's guest room with my son finally asleep beside me, I stared at that text for 11 minutes. Miss you both already. Written by a woman who, 48 hours earlier, had arranged for 2 men to burn her family alive, in their beds for a payout. Quinn had told me, explicitly, not to tip her off. So I did the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I texted back like nothing was wrong. All good here. House stuff is a mess. Don't worry about it. I've got it handled. Eli says hi. Land safe? Lol, you already landed. Love you. I threw my phone across the room after I hit send, and Jade found me on the floor of her closet 20 minutes later. Not crying. Just sitting there, staring at nothing. Running the words love you through my head like they were a foreign language I'd forgotten how to speak. We're going to get her, Jade said, sitting down next to me on the closet floor. Derek, look at me. We are going to get every single one of them. However Quinn tells us to. And if the law's too slow, Jade's face did something I'd never seen it do before. Something hard and flat and completely without mercy. We help it move faster. The plan Quinn eventually walked me through took 3 weeks to build, and I spent every day of those 3 weeks performing the single hardest role of my life. The grieving, oblivious husband. I called Eloise every night. Told her the insurance adjuster was slow, that we were staying with Jade, that Eli was having nightmares. That last part wasn't even a lie. I told her I loved her. Every night. I said the words, and felt something in me die a little more each time. But Quinn was building a case, and a case needs Eloise to believe, right up until the last second, that she'd gotten away with it. The break came from Caroline, of all people, not because she confessed, but because she got sloppy. Quinn's team had a warrant on Anthony's phone by then. Financial fraud angle, separate from the arson, and buried in a thread of texts between Caroline and Eloise. From the week before the fire was a message that made Quinn actually smile when she read it to me. Caroline, Blake wants half up front. You sure about this? Eloise, I've never been more sure of anything. He's been dead weight for years. And the kid, God, I love him, but I can't do this anymore. New start. Clean, I made Quinn read that second message to me 3 times. He's been dead weight for years. 15 years. A mortgage. A son we'd made together. Reduced to 2 words. Dead weight. We have enough for arrest warrants, Quinn told me. Anthony, Caroline, Blake, and the second man from the gas station footage. We got him too. One of Blake's regulars. Does odd jobs for cash, and doesn't ask questions. What we don't have, yet, is your wife directly ordering the hit. She's careful. Everything roots through Caroline. If we move now, on what we have, a decent lawyer gets her a plea on insurance fraud and maybe conspiracy. But the attempted murder charge, the one that actually matters, the one that reflects what she tried to do to you and your son, that's harder to make stick without her own words. So, what do you need? Quinn looked at me for a long moment. I need you to get her to talk. On a call I can record. Legally, with your consent as the other party on the line, which is all we need in this state. I need you to get her to say it herself. I thought about Eli, asleep down the hall in Jade's spare room, still flinching at the smell of anything burning, still sleeping with the hallway light on for the first time since he was 5. I thought about the words dead weight. Tell me what to say, I said. We rehearsed it 4 times, over 2 days. In a windowless room at the station that smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet, Quinn playing Eloise's part with unsettling precision, adjusting her voice to something warmer, softer, more like the woman I'd married than I was comfortable hearing come out of a detective's mouth. Don't lead with the accusation, she told me, the second time through. You lead with vulnerability. You're scared, you're exhausted, you love her, and you don't want to believe it. Let her think she's comforting you. Guilty people confess to people who are still hurting for them, not to people who are hunting them. And if she just says no, if she just denies it, flat, the whole time, then we don't have the confession, and we build the case another way, slower. But Derek, Quinn leaned forward. In my experience, people who've spent 6 weeks convinced they got away with something want, somewhere underneath all that careful planning, to say it out loud to one person. Just once. Most of them don't even know that about themselves, until the moment arrives. I thought about Caroline then, about a text I still hadn't been able to shake. A single line Jade had spotted 3 days earlier, scrolling through Eloise's old social media before the accounts went dark. A comment Caroline had left under a photo of our old kitchen, months before any of this. Back when I still thought her sharp little smile was just a personality quirk. Can't wait for the next chapter. Babe, you deserve it. At the time I hadn't even noticed it. Jade had found it and gone pale reading it out loud in her kitchen. Derek. This is from 5 months ago. So she knew 5 months ago. Whatever this was, it wasn't some spur-of-the-moment thing Caroline got dragged into. She's been in this with your wife since before the coverage even changed. I'd wanted, badly in the days after that, to drive to Caroline's apartment and put my fist through her door the way Dante had nearly put his through station drywall. Jade talked me out of it every single time. You confront her now, she calls Eloise inside of 10 minutes, and every bit of leverage Quinn's building just evaporates, she'd said, gripping my arm hard enough to leave a mark. You want her scared later, in a courtroom, in front of a jury, for the rest of her life. Not scared now, for 10 minutes, before she lawyers up and we lose everything. She was right. She was always right, that whole stretch of weeks, and I hated how much I needed her to be. That night, the 3 of us, me, Jade, Dante, sat around Jade's kitchen table, going through everything we'd learned so far, trying to build a timeline out of scraps. 5 months, Dante said, tapping the printed comment Jade had found. That comment's from 5 months ago. The coverage change was 6 weeks before the fire. So there's a 4-month gap where something was already moving, before the money side even started. Anthony, Jade said. Has to be. If Caroline knew 5 months out, and the affair with Anthony predates the coverage change by 8 months according to Quinn, that lines up. Eloise and Anthony start whatever this is. Somewhere in there, Caroline gets looped in as the go-between. Then, 6 weeks before the fire, the policy changes. Then, Blake gets hired. It's not one decision. It's a chain. A chain nobody snapped. I said. Not once. Not Caroline. Not Anthony. Not whoever else touched this. 5 months of opportunities to stop, and every single one of them kept walking. Dante leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. You know what gets me? Caroline held Eli when he was 4 days old. I remember it. She cried at your wedding, man. That's not a stranger who got roped into something. That's somebody who chose, every single day for 5 months, to keep smiling at that kid at birthday parties, while she was already in on a plan to kill him. Don't, I said, quieter than I meant to. I can't think about the birthday party thing right now. I'll lose it. Sorry. Dante held up both hands. You're right. Sorry. Jade reached over and took my hand. We don't need to understand why yet, Derek. We just need to build the case. The why comes out in court, where it belongs, in front of 12 people who get to decide what happens to her because of it. Right now our job is just evidence, timeline, facts Quinn can use. And staying away from Caroline's apartment, Dante added, with the ghost of a smile, trying to lighten it. And staying away from Caroline's apartment? I agreed. So I didn't go to Caroline's apartment. I sat in that windowless room instead, running the same 6 lines over and over with a detective playing my wife, until the words stopped feeling like words and started feeling like a key I was learning to fit into a lock. We did it on a Thursday, from Quinn's office, with a recorder running, and Jade sitting beside me holding my hand hard enough to leave marks. Eloise thought she was calling to check in about moving forward with the rebuild. I let her talk first. I let her ask about Eli, ask about the insurance timeline, ask, and I nearly lost it here, whether I'd found anywhere permanent to stay yet, because Caroline says the market's rough right now. Poor thing's been so supportive. Eloise, I said, and my voice came out steadier than I had any right to expect. I need to ask you something, and I need you to just be honest with me. Please, for once. Derek, what is this, did you know? About the fire. Before it happened. Silence, 3 full seconds of it, which doesn't sound long until you've lived inside it. What kind of question is that? Just answer me. Please. I can't sleep. Eloise, Eli can't sleep. I keep thinking about what would have happened if we'd gone straight home like we always do. And I need to know. I need to know if you knew. Because if you didn't, then we can get through this together. And if you did, I let my voice crack, and it wasn't hard. Because underneath the performance there was real grief clawing to get out. I just need the truth. Another silence. Then, quieter than I expected. Almost tender. Almost like the woman I married. Derek. Baby. Listen to me. It wasn't supposed to be like this. It wasn't supposed to be scary. Okay? It was supposed to be fast. You wouldn't have felt anything. Neither of you would have. I made sure of that part. I promised Caroline you wouldn't suffer. She stopped herself. I heard her breath catch, the sound of someone realizing, half a second too late, exactly what she'd just said out loud. Derek? I didn't answer. Derek, that's not. I didn't mean. You didn't mean it, I repeated, and something in my chest finally cracked open into the rage I'd been holding underwater for 3 weeks. You didn't mean to have your son burned alive in his bed. You just meant it to be fast. Derek, please, let me explain. It's not what you... Quinn was already nodding at me across the desk. We had it. Every word. Goodbye, Eloise, I said, and I hung up before she could say another thing to me ever again as a free woman. Quinn called me 4 hours later. Derek, we got her. I sat down hard on Jade's couch. Where? Hotel 2 towns over. Anthony was with her, 2 packed suitcases in the room. Looks like they were planning to run the second the insurance check cleared, maybe before. We picked up Caroline and Blake inside the same hour, coordinated, so nobody had time to warn anybody else. Did she? I didn't know how to finish the question. Quinn waited, patient, the way she'd been patient with me through every impossible question I'd asked her over the past 3 weeks. She didn't run, Quinn said finally. Didn't fight it. Just sat down on the edge of the bed when the officers came in. A pause. First thing she asked was whether your son was okay. I didn't know what to do with that. Some small, stupid 15 years of marriage part of me wanted it to mean something. Wanted it to be proof that somewhere in her, underneath all of it, she'd never actually wanted him hurt. Quinn must have heard something in my silence, because her voice went a little gentler. Derek, I've done this a long time. People ask that question for a lot of reasons. Sometimes it's love. Sometimes it's just self-preservation, wanting to know how bad the charges are going to be before she even knows she's been caught. I can't tell you which one it was. I don't think it matters much for what happens next. No, I agreed. It doesn't. You did good work these past 3 weeks, Quinn said. I know it didn't feel like it. But you did. Quinn told me all of this before Eloise's arraignment, before I'd seen so much as a photograph of the room they'd found her in. I didn't go. Jade offered. Dante offered. I said no. I stayed home, Jade's home, our temporary home, the closest thing Eli and I had to a home right then, and I made him grilled cheese, the one I'd promised him in the car 3 weeks earlier and never got the chance to deliver. He ate it at the kitchen table, feet not quite touching the floor, and halfway through he looked up at me with those quiet, watchful eyes that had saved both our lives. Is Mom in trouble? He asked. I thought about lying. I thought about softening it, the way you're supposed to soften things for 8-year-olds. Then I thought about dead weight, and he's been dead weight for years, and I promised Caroline you wouldn't suffer, and I decided my son had earned the truth more than most adults ever do. Yeah, bud, I said. She's in a lot of trouble, and she's not going to be able to hurt us anymore. I promise you that. He nodded, slow, like he was filing that away next to everything else he'd been carrying since the parking garage. Then he asked if he could have another grilled cheese, and I made him one, and for the first time in 3 weeks, I laughed. Actually laughed. Because 8-year-olds are the only people on Earth who can survive the end of the world and still have room for a second sandwich. The trial took the better part of a year. Anthony flipped first, trading testimony against Eloise and Caroline for a reduced sentence on the fraud charges. Turned out he'd done this kind of thing before. In a different state, under a different agent's license, which is its own story Quinn's still untangling. I sat in the gallery for his testimony too. The prosecutor walked him through it methodically, question by question, and I remember one exchange more clearly than almost anything else from that entire year. Anthony, whose idea was the coverage increase? Eloise's. She came to me about it directly. Said she wanted to make sure the family was protected in case anything happened to the house. Did you believe that was her real reason? Anthony hesitated, glancing once toward the defense table before answering. Not after the third conversation, no. By then she'd started asking specific questions, how fast claims typically got paid out, what kind of investigation a total loss fire usually triggered, whether prior relationship history between the policyholder and beneficiaries ever slowed anything down. And you processed the policy anyway. Yes, why? Another pause, longer this time, because I was already involved with her by then, and I told myself it wasn't my business what she did with a legal policy increase. I told myself a lot of things that year that weren't true. Did she ever discuss her husband directly with you? Derek? Once, she said. Anthony's voice caught, and for the first time since he'd taken the stand he looked, briefly, like a man who understood exactly what he'd helped build. She said Derek was a good father, and a good man, and that none of this was about hating him. She said it like that made it better somehow, like being a good man was almost worse, because it meant there wasn't a real excuse. I remember gripping the edge of the gallery bench so hard my knuckles went white. Jade's hand found mine before I even realized I needed it. No further questions, the prosecutor said. Blake and the man who'd driven him that night went down for arson and, thanks to that phone call, attempted murder. The additional named perils rider Anthony had filed became Exhibit A for premeditation. Since you don't insure a life you're not planning to end. Caroline pled out to conspiracy in exchange for testimony, which stung almost as much as Eloise's betrayal. Honestly, the woman who'd held my son 4 days old, describing under oath, in flat procedural language, exactly how she'd helped plan his death for a check. Eloise didn't plead. She fought it, hired the best lawyer Anthony's frozen assets could still afford before the state clawed them back, sat in that courtroom every day in a blazer that made her look like she was interviewing for a promotion instead of facing 40 years. Her lawyer tried to argue the phone call was inadmissible, coerced, emotionally manipulated out of her by a grieving husband exploiting her guilt. The judge didn't buy it. Quinn's paper trail, the policy, the texts, the gas station footage, the flight manifest, Anthony's testimony, and finally, Eloise's own voice, on tape, promising her best friend that her son wouldn't suffer, didn't leave a lot of room for reasonable doubt. I testified. I told them about the parking garage, about the whisper, about the porch light and the gasoline and the smell drifting across a dark yard while my son's fingers dug crescents into my arm. I told them about love you, texted back to a woman who'd tried to have us killed, because a detective asked me to keep her calm. I did not look at Eloise once while I spoke. I'd promised myself that in the mirror the morning of the trial, and it turned out to be the easiest promise I've ever kept. Eloise's lawyer tried, on cross, to make it sound like coaching, like Quinn had scripted my grief for maximum effect, like a father whose son had nearly burned to death and his sleep needed to be taught how to sound broken on a phone call. Derek, he said, pacing in front of the jury box like he was auditioning for something, isn't it true Detective Quinn told you exactly what to say to my client? Word for word? She told me what she needed me to get out of the conversation. She didn't have to teach me how to sound scared. I was scared. I'd been scared for 3 weeks straight, watching my son check under his bed for smoke every single night before he could fall asleep. But the emotion in that call, the crying, the "I need to know if you knew," that was performance. Wasn't it? Coached performance, designed to manipulate my client into an admission. I remember looking at him, not at Eloise, and answering slower than I meant to, because I wanted the jury to hear every word of it clean. The only person in that conversation who performed anything was the woman on the other end of the line, telling her husband she loved him 3 weeks after she paid 2 men to burn him alive in his own house. I didn't have to perform being a father whose son heard his own mother planning his death. That part was real the whole time. The defense attorney didn't have a follow-up for that. Quinn told me afterward, in the hallway, that 2 jurors had visibly reacted. One of them, an older woman in the second row, had put her hand over her mouth. Caroline testified 2 days after me, called by the prosecution as part of her plea deal, and I watched my son's one-time babysitter describe, in the flattest voice I've ever heard a human being use, exactly how the plan had come together. The coverage increase Anthony pushed through under a false renovation pretext. The burner phone Eloise bought for coordinating with Blake. The fake conference registration designed to put her name on a hotel guest list 3 states away while she was, in fact, parked 4 blocks from our house that entire evening, watching for the second-story lights to go dark. She told me it needed to look complete, Caroline said, when the prosecutor asked her to describe Eloise's exact instructions. She used the word complete. Not quick. Complete. I understood, hearing that word land in the courtroom, that whatever softness I'd imagined in that recorded phone call, it wasn't supposed to be scary. You wouldn't have felt anything, had never been real. It had been performance after all. Just not mine. The jury took 6 hours. Conspiracy to commit murder, arson, insurance fraud. Sentencing came 3 weeks later. The judge asked if the victims wished to address the court before he passed sentence, and I stood up before I'd fully decided to. "Derek," the judge said, "you may proceed." I didn't have notes. Jade had offered to help me write something the night before, and I'd told her no, because I didn't want it to sound rehearsed. I wanted Eloise to hear it plain. "My son is 8 years old," I said. He whispered a warning to me in a parking garage, because some part of him, at 8, already understood something I refused to understand for 15 years. That the person across from him wasn't who she pretended to be. He saved both our lives that night. Not the police. Not luck. An 8-year-old boy who noticed something was wrong and had the courage to say it out loud, even though he knew I might not believe him. I made myself look at her then. First time since the phone call. "You didn't just try to take my life. You tried to take his." And in the recording this court has already heard, the thing that struck me most wasn't the plan, or the money, or even the word you used for me. It was how calm you sounded, how certain. Like burning your own son in his bed while he slept was just a detail to manage. A logistics problem. I don't need you to understand what that did to him. I need this court to understand that a woman capable of sounding that calm while describing that plan does not get the benefit of a lighter sentence, because she cried later, once, after she got caught. The judge asked if I had anything further. I said one more thing. I don't forgive her. I want that on the record too, for whatever it's worth. Not because I'm bitter, because forgiveness isn't owed to people who never asked for it and never meant it. She doesn't get my forgiveness. She gets exactly what this court decides she gets, and not one thing more. I sat back down. Jade squeezed my hand hard enough to bruise. Across the room, Eloise didn't look at me. She'd stopped looking at me somewhere around the 3rd week of trial. I'd noticed, like she'd finally understood there was nothing left to find in my face that would help her case. The judge handed down 41 years. No chance of parole before Eli's own children would be old enough to whisper secrets of their own in the dark. I felt nothing when they read it. I want to tell you I felt triumphant. Felt some enormous cathartic release, the kind you get in movies. I didn't. I felt the way you feel when you finally set down something unbearably heavy. Not joy, just the sudden disorienting lightness of your arms, remembering how to hang normally at your sides. Jade found me on the courthouse steps afterward, staring at nothing in particular. "You okay?" she asked. "I don't know what I am." "That's allowed." She sat down next to me on the concrete, not caring about her nice court clothes. "You don't have to feel triumphant, Derek. 41 years isn't a party. It's just the scale finally balancing back out a little. I keep waiting to feel like it's over. It's not going to feel like that for a while. Maybe ever. Not all the way. But it doesn't have to feel over for you to start actually living again. Those aren't the same thing, and I don't want you waiting around for the wrong one before you let yourself have the second one. When did you get so wise? I've always been this wise. You've just been too busy being the older sibling to notice." She bumped her shoulder into mine. "Go pick up your kid from school. Take him for ice cream. Don't tell him the verdict in the car. Tell him at home, sitting down, when he can ask you as many questions as he needs to. He's earned that. How do you know he's going to have questions?" "Because he's your son," Jade said. "He always has questions. It's the whole reason either of you is still breathing." I picked Eli up from school that afternoon and didn't say a word about the courthouse until we were home, sitting across from each other at the kitchen table, the way Jade had told me to. He listened to the whole thing without interrupting, which wasn't like him, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. 41 years, he finally said. "That's basically forever." "Basically," I agreed. "Good," he said, and went to go get a snack, and that was that. No tears. No big emotional scene, just an 8-year-old boy deciding, out loud and without apology, that some things simply deserved to be over. We live in a new house now, Eli and I, smaller than the old one, on a street with better lighting and neighbors who wave instead of just nodding. Jade and Don T are 4 minutes away, which is exactly as close as I need them, and exactly as far as I need to prove to myself I can do this on my own most days. Eli's 10 now. Still quiet, still watchful, though the flinching at kitchen smoke stopped somewhere around year 2, and the hallway light finally goes off most nights. He doesn't ask about his mother much anymore. When he does, I tell him the truth, sized down for whatever age he is that year, the way you're supposed to. He knows she's in prison. He knows why, in the broad shape of it, if not every ugly detail. He knows I've never once, not for a single second since that whisper in a parking garage, doubted a word he told me. A few months ago, over dinner, he asked me something that caught me off guard. "Dad, do you think I'm weird for hearing stuff other people don't notice?" "No," I told him. "I think you're the reason we're both sitting at this table right now, instead of not sitting anywhere at all. I think whatever that thing is in you that notices things, I hope you never lose it. I hope it makes you a little annoying to live with for the rest of your life. Honestly. Because I owe that thing everything." He grinned at that, the real grin, the one that still looks exactly like it did when he was 4. "Can we get a dog? Dogs notice things too." "We are not getting a dog because you want to team up with it." "That's not a no. It's not a yes either. Jade says you always cave eventually. Jade needs to mind her own business." He laughed, actually laughed, loud and unguarded, the sound bouncing off the kitchen walls of a house that has never once, not for a single night, made either of us afraid to fall asleep in it. I made a mental note to call a shelter that weekend. Some promises you make in your head instead of out loud, because you already know you're going to keep them. Sometimes at night, after he's asleep, I sit in the kitchen and think about how close I came to laughing him off entirely. How close I came to driving straight home that night, tired, distracted, ready for a grilled cheese and an early bed, dismissing an 8-year-old's whisper as nothing more than an overactive imagination. I think about Quinn's voice on the phone, telling me the flight manifest showed a no-show. I think about Caroline's text, "He's been dead weight for years," and Eloise's voice on that recorded call, warm and almost loving, promising her best friend that her family wouldn't feel a thing. And then I think about the sound of my son's voice in the dark of that car, small and certain, and utterly unwilling to be talked out of what he knew to be true. "Dad, we can't go home. We didn't. And because we didn't, we're still here, and she isn't. Not anywhere that matters anymore. Not in this house. Not in this life. Not in one single day either of us has left to live. I don't forgive her. I want to be clear about that, in case anyone reading this is waiting for the part where I find some grace, some peace, Some line about how holding on to anger only hurts you. Maybe that's true for other people, other stories. It isn't true for mine. Some things don't deserve forgiveness. Some things only deserve consequences, delivered in full, and then a door closed behind them for good. I closed that door 41 years wide. I don't plan on ever opening it again.